scientists gathered human remains and carried out forbidden experiments, unleashing a savage monster.
It's alive. It's alive.
Early 19th century, the world stands on the brink of revolutionary change. Alongside the surge in political activism, an unprecedented boom in science emerges, promising to reshape humanity's future. The thirst for knowledge has never been greater, and among the most ambitious seekers is Captain Robert Walton, an explorer obsessed with reaching the North Pole. 1794. As Walton and his crew near their goal, their ship becomes trapped in ice. Several men fall into the freezing waters and perish, but what terrifies Walton more is their halted progress. Consumed by his obsession, he is willing to sacrifice his entire crew to achieve his dream. Then, amidst the desolation, they spot a lone traveler, Victor Frankenstein. Behind him, the agonized howl of a monster echoes through the frozen wasteland as sled dogs rush toward the sound, only to become its next victims. Now aboard Walton's ship, Frankenstein, exhausted and haunted, begins to recount his harrowing tale, the creation of something truly monstrous. 1773. In Geneva, young Victor Frankenstein, the son of a baron and an aristocrat, first meets Elizabeth, an orphan girl who is taken in by his family as his foster sister. While Victor spends most of his time buried in books, his talent in science quickly sets the course for his future. But even as his academic pursuits intensify, his bond with Elizabeth deepens, their childhood affection growing into love. It seems Victor has everything one could wish for, until tragedy strikes. His mother dies giving birth to his younger brother. Devastated, Victor swears to one day unlock the secret of eternal life. Soon, he receives an invitation to study at Ingolstadt. During his farewell party, he promises Elizabeth that he will marry her upon his return before departing for Germany. At university, Victor faces immediate resistance. Most professors adhere strictly to conventional science and reject his unorthodox ideas. This leads to conflicts, but one man sees potential in him. Professor Waldman, a radical thinker who has studied the human body in depth and come dangerously close to creating artificial life. Intimidated by the authorities, Waldman has abandoned his research, but he allows Victor to assist him in anatomical experiments, setting in motion a chain of events that will change everything. Soon, a smallpox epidemic sweeps through Ingolstadt, claiming thousands of lives. Waldman and other doctors are forced to take part in vaccinating the townspeople with a serum that protects against the disease. During the inoculation process, Waldman encounters a vagrant dragged in off the streets, someone who deeply mistrusts medicine. Convinced they're trying to infect him rather than protect him, the man refuses to be vaccinated. With no time or energy to argue, Waldman orders him to be restrained, but the vagrant fights back. In a moment of panic, he pulls out a knife and fatally stabs the professor. Victor desperately tries to save his mentor, but all efforts to revive him fail. A few days later, the murderer is executed by hanging. Shaken to his core, Victor refuses to let his teacher's work die with him. In secret, he resolves to continue Waldman's research. As he digs through old notes and experiments, he stumbles upon a remarkable theory. At the core of human life lies energy. With the right methods, it should be possible to artificially create life, real, living beings. But Waldman had abandoned the project, disappointed by his results. His experiments had indeed produced life, but not as he had hoped. The creations were monstrous in appearance, their characteristics entirely dependent on the materials used. Taking this idea literally, Victor makes a chilling decision. He will resurrect his fallen mentor. Pouring all his savings into lab equipment, he transforms his attic into a secret laboratory. One night, he ventures into the town square, retrieving the hanged corpse of Waldman's murderer. Then, he sneaks into the cemetery to steal the professor's body. His friend Henry is horrified, pleading with Victor to abandon this madness, warning that it defies the laws of nature. But Victor won't listen. To him, science is above superstition, above fear. If he succeeds, he will revolutionize the world and grant humanity eternal life. As the days pass, Victor becomes consumed by his work. He robs the morgue for body parts, extracts Waldman's brain, and carefully selects only the finest materials in an effort to create the perfect man. Obsessed, he shuts himself off from the outside world. He forgets about his family. He forgets about Elizabeth. Worried sick, Elizabeth writes letters on his behalf for months to cover for his absence, but the strain takes its toll. Seeing her fall into despair, Justine suggests they travel to Germany so she can confront Victor in person and finally uncover the truth. After gathering the necessary materials, including the fluid released during childbirth, Victor begins a series of forbidden experiments, not recognized by official science. To start, he tests everything on a frog and is overjoyed when it comes back to life. Fueled by success, Victor doesn't notice the frog's incredible strength as it shatters the glass container. With no further obstacles in his way, he turns his attention to creating a human. Returning to the body, Victor sews the parts together, completing the preparatory phase. Exhausted, he falls asleep next to his future creation. The next morning, Henry knocks on Victor's door, asking to come in. A state of emergency has been declared in the city, and soon no one will be able to leave. The number of infected people is rising rapidly, and they must leave immediately, or everyone will be doomed to a painful death. Victor ignores the threat, consumed by his project, determined to see it through to the end. Elizabeth, who had come to Germany to meet her lover and convince him to return to Geneva, intervenes. Trying to hide his experiments, Victor locks the attic door and dismisses Elizabeth's request. His mission is more important than love, and he is willing to sacrifice everything to finish his work. Heartbroken, Elizabeth leaves, no longer wanting to see Victor. Henry realizes this isn't right and tries to stop her, but he loses sight of her in the crowd of panicked citizens. Realizing time is running out, Victor decides to proceed with the experiment immediately. He places the body in a special vessel, fills it with liquid, and connects it to the electrical circuit. Using the electric charge from fish, Victor conducts the experiment, watching the results unfold. At one point, his creation's eyes flicker open, and it seems that everything has succeeded. Turning off the power, the scientist rushes to the metallic container, but finds the body motionless. Victor is overcome with intense disappointment, as this is the failure of his entire life, one he has paid a heavy price for. It seems all is lost, but then the creation begins to stir. Victor hurries to release it from the capsule, but the creation smashes through the metal door, showing incredible strength. Despite its aggression and physical prowess, the creation is completely clumsy, unable to stand on its own. Victor tries to calm it and help it get on its feet, but a series of accidents leads to the creation being struck in the head by a heavy object, rendering it unconscious and hanging in chains. Realizing the experiment has failed and the creation is dead, Victor makes a final entry in his journal, promising to destroy it the next morning. In the middle of the night, Victor wakes up to a strange noise and is shocked to find the resurrected monster standing before him. Terrified, he hides in one of the rooms, grabs an axe, and resolves to kill the creation. By the time he prepares, the monster escapes the laboratory, stealing only a cloak. The next morning, the creation awakens on the streets of the city, searching for food. Not understanding that food requires payment, it encounters aggressive people. When the crowd sees its face, they mistake the monster for a cholera carrier and viciously beat it. The creation defends itself, showing incredible strength, but is forced to retreat. Hunted by all, the monster leaves Ingolstadt, seeking a safer place. A few days later, Victor regains consciousness and is greeted by Henry, who has been taking care of him throughout his illness. The scientist had contracted pneumonia and had been on the brink of life and death for several days. Now, feeling slightly better, Henry leaves Victor to sit for his final exam and graduate as a doctor. Hearing piano music, Victor heads to the next room and finds Elizabeth. Unable to leave her beloved behind, she returned as soon as she heard he was ill. Victor apologizes and realizes how close he came to losing the most precious person in his life. Regretting his past decisions, he promises Elizabeth that they will marry as soon as they return to Geneva. Meanwhile, the creation finds a lonely peasant's farm and hides in the pigsty among the animals. After receiving some food and water, the monster decides to stay there. In the stolen cloak, Victor's journal is discovered, but the creation does not understand what it is or how to use the scientist's notes. Hiding in the barn, the creation overhears the family's conversations and learns that they are in dire financial straits. They lack money for food and housing, and the only asset they have is their land. But due to the harsh winter, the land is frozen, and the peasants are unable to work it. Understanding their plight, the creation leaves the barn at night to do all the labor for them. In the morning, when the family discovers the harvested crops, they believe a benevolent forest spirit has helped them. The old man, the head of the family, is not only certain of the forest spirit's existence, but also hears the creation lurking nearby. Due to his blindness, he doesn't notice the monster hiding among the trees, so he believes it to be a spirit protecting his family. That evening, the mother teaches her daughter to read and write, which turns out to be useful for the creation. Eavesdropping on their conversations and gathering fragments of memories in his mind, the monster begins to think and read. This also allows him to study Victor's journal and discover that his creator is Victor Frankenstein. Meanwhile, Victor gathers all his equipment to leave Ingolstadt and return to Geneva. Not wanting to part with his best friend, he offers Henry the chance to become a doctor in Switzerland, and Henry agrees. During the New Year holidays, the peasant family decides to leave food and flowers for the forest spirit. This kind gesture makes a lasting impression on the creation, as he feels valued, even though they don't understand he's human. A few days later, the landlord arrives at the house, demanding payment for the rent. Showing aggression, he attacks the little girl and then beats the old man. The creation decides to protect the family and kills the man who dared harm the grandfather and his granddaughter. Hearing someone in the house, the blind old man asks the creation to sit with him and talk. The monster admits that he looks terrible and fears that no one will accept him. When the old man touches his face, he understands and expresses sympathy. It seems that the blind man is the only one who understands the creation and sees something good behind the grotesque appearance. At that moment, the old man's son returns home and, mistaking the creation for the one who hurt his father and daughter, brutally beats him. The monster runs away and hides in the forest, struggling to hold back tears. He's disappointed by such behavior and aggression, as he hasn't done anything wrong. It feels like people are unfairly cruel to him, and this will never change, but the creation decides to give them a second chance. Finding a flower that the little girl had left behind in his sleeve, the creation returns to the peasant's house, only to realize they've fled. Later, he decides to finish reading his creator's journal and discovers that Victor had considered him pitiful, useless, and unable to survive in this world. Finally disillusioned with people and his own existence, the creation vows to take revenge on Frankenstein and burns the house in the forest. Sometime later, Elizabeth returns to Geneva to the Frankenstein family mansion. Going for a fitting of her wedding dress, she gives the bracelet that Victor had given her to his younger brother, William. The boy, eager to show off the pendant with Victor's picture, goes outside to brag to the neighborhood kids. Suddenly, he hears a beautiful melody coming from the garden. Following the sound, William meets the creation and, terrified, tries to run away from him. Seeing the photograph of Victor enrages the monster, and in a fit of rage, he catches and kills William. Soon, the mansion notices the disappearance of the boy, and a search begins. Victor returns home and learns about what happened, joining the search himself. Justine feels guilty, as she is the housekeeper, and it is her responsibility to look after the boy. The maid searches for the child deep into the night, eventually falling asleep exhausted in the barn. There, she is found by the creature, who decides to leave behind the pendant that belonged to the boy. That night, the search party finds William's body and reports the tragic death of the child. Victor's father suffers a heart attack, and the Baron is confined to his bed. Justine's mother notices her daughter hasn't returned and fears something has happened to her. She pleads with Victor to do everything he can to find Justine, but the detectives have already beaten him to it. They not only found the maid but also accused her of the boy's murder due to the evidence they found. Upon learning that the girl is being accused of killing the child, an enraged mob of townspeople decides to take matters into their own hands. Without wanting to investigate whether she is truly guilty, they take Justine to the roof of a tall building and execute her. That night, the creature decides to confront Victor face to face and demands a meeting in the land of eternal ice. Realizing that the creature is responsible for everything that has happened, Victor accepts the monster's terms and sets out after it with the sole aim of finding and killing his own creation. He postpones the wedding for a month and ignores Elizabeth's pleas to stay, heading toward the North Pole. At one point, the creature attacks him and pushes him down, leaving Victor in a cave without any weapons. With a chance to speak, the monster criticizes the scientist, calling him a madman. Victor had treated the collected organs as raw material, forgetting that they were parts of a human body. Everything has memory, which gave the creature an incredible combination of abilities and possibilities. The experiments have consequences, but the scientist never considered them, as his pride was above all. Despite its anger and cruelty, the creature is willing to spare Victor's life and forget about him forever, but only on the condition that Victor fulfills its request. The most valuable thing in human life is love, and even a monster needs it. The creature declares that it will leave humanity forever and live in the eternal ice if Victor creates a woman for it. With no other choice, Victor agrees and promises the creature a bride. Returning to his father's house, he begins preparations for the new experiment and then asks Elizabeth to postpone the wedding for 1 month. She takes this as a refusal to marry her. She is offended that Victor places science above their feelings, so Elizabeth decides to pack her things and leave the house for good. That evening, the creature digs up Justine's corpse from the grave, intending for her to be his future bride. Upon seeing the familiar face and realizing how immoral this is, Victor refuses to carry out the experiment to create the monster's wife. Enraged, the creature vows to take revenge and rob Victor of his first wedding night. Finally realizing that love is more important than science, Victor chases after Elizabeth and begs her not to leave. He is willing to do anything for the person he loves and will abandon everything just to have her by his side. Knowing that her feelings are mutual, Elizabeth suggests they not postpone the wedding and legalize their relationship today. With her father's blessing, Victor and Elizabeth become husband and wife. Knowing that the creature will try to disrupt their wedding night and may go to extreme lengths, the newlyweds decide to run away. Leaving armed guards at Victor's father's house, they head to the port to catch the last ferry, but they are too late. At the same time, the creature sneaks into Victor's father's chambers and watches the old man die. It's night on the streets, so the newlyweds are forced to stay at a hotel guarded by their assistants. Trying to forget about the looming dangers, Victor and Elizabeth decide to spend their first wedding night, but suddenly they hear the sound of a flute playing. Victor realizes that the monster is near and goes with the guards to search for it. Meanwhile, the creature sneaks into the newlyweds' bedroom, admiring Elizabeth's beauty before ripping her heart out. In a state of extreme despair, Victor returns to his father's house with Elizabeth's body, determined to resurrect her. Henry tries to dissuade him, calling it madness, but Victor will not be stopped. Using Elizabeth's head and the body of the executed Justine, he stitches them together to create a woman. Having brought Elizabeth back to life, Victor dresses her in her wedding gown and places the engagement ring on her finger. Elizabeth cannot speak his name, but the fragments of memory allow them to dance the waltz. Having created another monster, Victor feels happy, but unexpectedly, the creature appears, calling the girl to him. Elizabeth finds herself between two men, each arguing for the right to possess her. Retaining fragments of her mind and memory, she realizes how awful everything is. Not wanting to continue living as a monster, she takes a kerosene lamp and commits self-immolation before Victor and his first creation. After the incident, the creature disappears, and Victor becomes obsessed with finding it. He travels to the North Pole, pursuing the creature, but is too exhausted. Finishing his tale, Victor dies in Walton's captain's cabin. The ship's captain dismisses this terrifying story as a fabrication but soon hears the dreadful sounds of the approaching monster. Returning to the cabin, he finds the creature, weeping over Victor's body. Despite its horrific nature, the creature considered Victor a father and asks for a funeral pyre. As the crew prepares Victor for his final journey, the ice around the ship recedes. In a panic, the crew rushes back aboard, and the monster burns itself and its creator. Seeing the consequences of mad desires and ambition, Walton changes his mind and orders the ship to return home. If a creature has intelligence, emotions, and a desire for love, does it deserve to be called human? Or does its artificial origin condemn it to be an eternal outcast? Share your thoughts in the comments down below, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.